You smell it before you see it, the metallic tang of fresh blood cutting through the dying fragrance of jasmine and frankincense from last night's wedding ceremony. Your eyes adjust to the pale Constantinople dawn, filtering through the stained glass windows of the imperial palace's bridal chamber, and there she is. Princess Theodora lies crumpled on the marble floor like a discarded silk doll, her wedding gown, worth more than most men earn in a lifetime, now a canvas of crimson. The ceremonial dagger that should have cut the wedding cake protrudes from her throat at an obscene angle. Above her stands her mother, Empress Eudokia Makrembolitisa, still wearing the imperial purple robes from the ceremony, the gold threads of her sleeve cuffs now darkened with her daughter's blood. The Empress's face is stone, not grief, not horror, stone. You watch her fingers, those same fingers that once braided Theodora's hair for bedtime prayers, as they tremble while removing her own signet ring, the ring that bears the double-headed eagle of Byzantium, the symbol that has ruled half the world for 800 years. She slides it onto her dead daughter's finger with the tenderness of a final blessing, or perhaps a curse. The executioner kneels behind the Empress, his head bowed in submission, awaiting his own fate. His name is Andreas, and you can see in his weathered face that this was not his first imperial killing, but it was different. His hands still shake. Even professional killers have limits. "It is done, Basilissa," he whispers, using the ancient Greek title for Empress. His voice cracks on the words. Eudokia does not respond. She stares at her daughter's face, eyes closed, lips slightly parted as if about to speak. The wedding crown of gold and pearls sits askew in Theodora's dark hair, and the Empress reaches down to straighten it with the same maternal instinct that once comforted scraped knees and childhood nightmares. The morning light grows stronger, streaming through the windows in geometric patterns of ruby and gold, illuminating the horror with savage beauty. Somewhere in the distance, church bells begin to ring for morning prayers, calling the faithful to worship the Virgin Mother who protects all children. The irony is not lost on anyone in this room. You notice the wedding sheets, silk imported from distant China, woven with threads of actual gold, still bear the outline of where the Bulgarian Khan Omatag had passed out, drunk barely 2 hours ago, before being quietly escorted away by the Empress's guards. He never knew his bride was already dead. He never knew he had been saved from this doomed alliance by the very brutality he would have recognized and respected. Eudokia's lips move in what might be prayer or might be madness. "Forgive me," she whispers, but whether to her daughter, to God, or to herself you cannot tell. Perhaps there is no difference anymore. The Empress turns to Andreas, and for the first time since you entered this chamber of horrors, her mask slips. Her face contorts with an anguish so profound it seems to crack reality itself. This is what it looks like when a mother's love becomes so twisted by power and necessity that it devours itself. "Tell no one," she commands, but her voice is hollow, echoing like a stone dropped into a bottomless well. The princess died of wedding night fever, a tragic accident. The Khan's marriage was never consummated. Andreas nods, understanding. In Byzantium, there are always official truths and actual truths, and the gap between them is often filled with blood. As you watch, Eudokia kneels beside her daughter one final time. She places her hand over Theodora's heart, that heart she once felt flutter with life in her womb, that heart she taught to beat with love for literature and philosophy and God. That heart she has just stopped forever. "The Empire endures," she whispers to the corpse. "The Empire always endures." But you can see in her eyes that she no longer believes it. You can see that something has broken in her that will never heal, something that makes her question whether an empire that demands such sacrifices is worth preserving at all. The bells continue to ring, the blood continues to pool. And somewhere in the palace, servants are already preparing the announcement of the tragic princess's sudden death, weaving the lie that will protect the empire from the truth of what its survival costs. 18 months earlier, you stand in the palace of Blackeney's Hanging Gardens, watching 17-year-old Princess Theodora laugh with pure, unconscious joy. She sits beside Michael Palaiologos, a minor nobleman who serves in her mother's imperial guard, reading aloud from Sappho's poetry while he attempts to weave jasmine flowers into her hair with comically clumsy fingers. Listen to this line, Theodora says, her voice musical with delight. Someone will remember us, I say, even in another time. She looks up at Michael with eyes bright as Byzantine gold. Do you think that's true? That love can survive time itself? Michael's hands still in her hair. At 22, he's old enough to understand the precariousness of their situation, young enough to believe love might conquer it. If anyone's love could survive eternity, it would be yours, my lady. You see the blush bloom across Theodora's cheeks like spring roses. She has been educated in rhetoric, theology, mathematics, and 4 languages. She composes poetry that would make Constantinople's greatest scholars weep. She debates theological fine points with the palace chaplains and wins. But she has never learned the most crucial lesson of imperial life, that princesses are not people, but currency. The illusion shatters when Empress Eudokia appears in the garden doorway like an avenging angel. Even at 41 she is beautiful, but it's the terrible beauty of a sword blade, sharp, cold, and deadly. Her face reveals nothing as she watches her daughter's happiness, but you can see her mentally calculating its price. Michael, she says quietly, you are needed in the Eastern barracks. Immediately. It's not a request. Michael bows deeply, his eyes meeting Theodora's for what neither knows will be the last time. After he leaves, mother and daughter face each other across the garden's marble fountain like opposing armies. The Arab invasions have reached Amorian, Eudokia announces without preamble. Caliph al-Mutamid's forces advance on Ankara. We are outnumbered 3-1. Theodora's face pales, but she's intelligent enough to know this is leading somewhere terrible. What does that mean for us, mother? It means survival requires sacrifice. It means the Bulgarian Khan Omatag has offered a military alliance in exchange for marriage to the imperial princess. The words fall like stones into still water, creating ripples that will spread until they shatter everything. You watch Theodora's world crumble in real time. Her mouth opens, closes, searches for words that don't exist. Mother, no, please. I cannot. He is a pagan, a barbarian who, he is survival. Eudokia's voice cuts through her daughter's pleas like a blade through silk. 20,000 Bulgarian cavalry, fortified borders, safe trade routes. The empire's continued existence. But I love Michael. The empress moves closer, and you see something terrible in her eyes. The look of a woman who has already made an impossible choice and is now forcing herself to live with it. Do you think I loved your father when I married him? Do you think choice was ever part of my life? The question hangs between them like incense smoke. Theodora stares at her mother, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the loving parent who sang lullabies and kissed scraped knees, but as the political creature necessity has created. I will not do it, Theodora whispers, but even she can hear the futility in her own voice. Eudokia's expression softens for just a moment, revealing the mother beneath the empress. She reaches out to touch her daughter's face with infinite tenderness. My beloved child, you will do it because you are imperial. You will do it because the alternative is watching our people die. You will do it because I am commanding you, and I am your emperor. That night, you follow Theodora to her chambers, where she kneels before an icon of the Virgin and Child, weeping prayers that receive no answer. Outside her window, you can see Michael's quarters in the guards' barracks, where a single candle burns until dawn before being forever extinguished. The arrangement of souls has begun, and neither mother nor daughter will survive it unchanged. You stand in the palace's weaving rooms, watching the imperial dressmakers measure Princess Theodora's body like merchants calculating the worth of expensive goods. The tape measures encircle her waist, her hips, her throat, each measurement recorded in careful Greek script that will be sent to Bulgarian craftsmen who will create the ceremonial garments of her surrender. Lift your arms, Despina, commands Maria, the head seamstress, using the title that means princess, but sounds increasingly like prisoner. Theodora complies with the mechanical obedience of the already defeated, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the palace walls. The dress taking shape around her is a masterpiece of Byzantine craftsmanship and Bulgarian barbarism. Cloth of gold, woven with Christian crosses and pagan symbols, pearls from the Black Sea sewn alongside amber beads blessed by shamans. It is beautiful and obscene, sacred and profane, a perfect representation of the compromise that is slowly killing her soul. In the corners of the room, you notice the Empress watching from the shadows, her face a mask of maternal stone. She has not spoken directly to Theodora in 3 weeks, communicating only through servants and court officials. The distance is deliberate. She is teaching herself not to see her daughter as human, making the necessary psychological preparations for what she has already decided must happen. The scene shifts to the palace's scriptorium, where Theodora sits hunched over parchment, laboriously copying Cyrillic letters under the tutelage of Father Constantine, a priest who spent years in Bulgarian captivity and returned with the strange alphabet burned into his memory like scars. "Right, I submit to your will, my lord," Father Constantine instructs in his ruined voice. In Bulgarian, it is Povinuvam se na tevoata volia, gospodar. Each letter Theodora traces feels like carving her own gravestone. The Bulgarian script is harsh, angular, nothing like the flowing curves of Greek that have shaped her thoughts since childhood. Learning this alphabet is learning to think like prey, to speak in the language of submission. "Why does he require letters in his own tongue?" Theodora asks, not looking up from her work. "Surely the Khan's scribes can translate Greek." Father Constantine's laugh is bitter as winter wind. He wants to know that you can humble yourself to learn his ways. In Bulgaria, wives who cannot speak properly are considered cursed by the spirits. They are cast out to die. Learn submission, or face a fate worse than this marriage. You follow Theodora to her lessons in Bulgarian customs, conducted by Nikephoros, a eunuch who serves as the Empress's cultural advisor. His quarters are decorated with artifacts from across the empire. Avar drinking horns, Bulgar leather armor, Arab manuscripts, the spoils of a lifetime spent studying the empire's enemies to better negotiate with them. The Khan will expect you to serve him fermented mare's milk during the morning ritual, Nikephoros explains, his soft voice making the barbaric customs sound almost reasonable. You must kneel while offering it, keeping your eyes downcast. Never meet his gaze unless he commands it. Theodora practices the movements with the resigned grace of a dancer learning funeral rites. Each gesture of submission is rehearsed until it becomes muscle memory, until her body learns to betray her spirit automatically. "What if I refuse?" she asks quietly. "What if I simply cannot do it?" Nikephoros' expression grows gentle, which somehow makes his words more terrible. "Then you will be killed, princess. Not quickly, not cleanly, but as an example to other foreign wives who might consider defiance." The Khan has done this before. That evening, you observe Empress Eudokia in her private chapel, kneeling before the same icon of the Virgin and Child that Theodora prays to each night. But where her daughter begs for deliverance, the Empress prays for strength to complete what she has begun. "Holy Mother," she whispers, "you watched your son die for the salvation of many. Help me to understand how that felt. Help me to bear what must be borne." The icon's painted eyes seem to stare back with accusation rather than comfort. The Virgin's expression, once serene, now appears to judge the Empress for the perversion of maternal love she is about to commit. A messenger arrives with reports from the Eastern Front, another city fallen to the Arabs, another 1,000 Byzantine soldiers dead. The military situation grows more desperate daily, making the Bulgarian alliance not just politically advantageous but existentially necessary. Eudokia reads the dispatches by candlelight, each casualty report another weight on the scales that balance her daughter's life against the empire's survival. By dawn, the choice has calcified into certainty. She will sacrifice one beloved child to save thousands of children she has never met but is sworn to protect. The architecture of obedience is nearly complete. Soon there will be only the final, terrible test of its construction. You stand in the shadows of the palace's sacred baptistry, watching Princess Theodora's final act of rebellion unfold in the pre-dawn darkness. She moves through the cavernous space like a sleepwalker, her white nightgown ghostly in the flickering candlelight. Approaching the marble font where she was baptized as an infant 18 years ago, the holy water reflects her face, gaunt now from weeks of refusing food, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights spent writing letters to Michael that she burns before dawn. She stares at her reflection as if seeing a stranger, which in many ways she is. The laughing girl from the gardens died months ago. What remains is something brittle and desperate. Forgive me, Holy Mother, she whispers to the baptistry's frescoed walls, where painted saints watch with expressions that seem more sorrowful than usual. But I cannot be what they require me to become. She steps into the font fully clothed, the sacred water rising to her waist, then her chest. You watch her face transform, not with peace, but with grim determination. She has decided that drowning in holy water is preferable to living as a barbarian's plaything. But the guards have been watching. They were always watching. They pull her from the font like fishermen hauling in a net, her nightgown clinging to her shivering body, holy water streaming from her hair like tears. She does not struggle. There is no fight left in her, only the terrible understanding that even death is not hers to choose. The guards deliver their dripping, defeated cargo directly to Empress Eudokia's private chambers, where mother and daughter face each other in a confrontation that will sever the last threads of their relationship forever. "Did you think drowning would solve anything?" the Empress asks, her voice deadly quiet. She stands before her polished bronze mirrors, but you notice she cannot bring herself to look at her reflection while speaking to her daughter. "Did you think your suicide would free you from your duty?" Theodora says nothing. Water still drips from her hair onto the marble floor, each drop echoing in the silence like a death knell. "Answer me," Eudokia commands, finally turning from the mirrors to face her child. What you see in her eyes is no longer recognizably maternal. It is the cold calculation of a woman who has moved beyond human feeling into something else entirely. "I cannot do what you ask," Theodora whispers. "I cannot become what you need me to be." The Empress crosses the room in 3 strides and strikes her daughter across the face with a sound like breaking glass. But instead of anger, her voice becomes soft, almost tender, which is somehow infinitely more terrifying. "My darling child," she says, "you misunderstand. This is not about what you can or cannot do. This is about what you will do because I am commanding it, and because the alternative is watching everything we have ever protected crumble into dust." She moves to her writing desk and picks up a letter bearing the imperial seal. "Do you know what this is?" "A report from General Patronus. The Arabs have taken Sinope. They have slaughtered every man, woman, and child in the city. The harbor ran red for 3 days." Theodora's face crumples, but Eudokia continues relentlessly. 3,000 souls, Theodora. 3,000 Byzantine children who will never grow up, never laugh, never love, because I failed to secure the alliances that might have saved them. She holds up another letter. And this, from the Khan's emissary. He grows impatient. He threatens to ally with the Arabs instead, if we delay much longer. The arithmetic of imperial survival spreads across the room like spilled wine. 1 princess against 3,000 children. 1 marriage against the empire's continued existence. "I loved you too much," the Empress says, and her voice finally breaks. "I loved you so much that I forgot you were not mine to keep. You belong to Byzantium. You always have." That night, you follow Eudokia to her mirrors, where she practices the expressions she will need for the wedding ceremony: maternal pride, joyful anticipation, satisfied triumph. But in the bronze reflections, you see only emptiness. The woman who raised Theodora with lullabies and bedtime stories has been consumed by the Empress, who must sacrifice her for the greater good. She begins referring to her daughter in the past tense, as if the drowning attempt had succeeded after all. In many ways it had. The Theodora who laughed in gardens died in that baptistery, replaced by something that breathes and walks but no longer truly lives. The final preparations can now begin. You stand in the Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in Christendom, watching a ceremony that mocks everything sacred about marriage. The massive dome soars overhead like the vault of heaven itself, but today it feels more like a tomb. Golden mosaics of Christ and the Virgin seem to weep in the flickering light of 1,000 candles, their painted faces turned away from the blasphemy unfolding below. Princess Theodora processes down the marble aisle like a sacrifice approaching the altar. Her wedding gown is a masterpiece of Byzantine artistry, cloth of gold, embroidered with pearls, a train so heavy it requires 6 attendants to carry it. but she moves within it like a ghost inhabiting someone else's life. The traditional wedding crown of gold and precious stones sits on her head like a target, marking her as both royalty and victim. Beside you, Empress Eudokia watches her daughter with the fixed smile of a woman who has perfected the art of public deception. She wears the ceremonial purple of imperial authority, but you notice her hands shake slightly as she holds them clasped before her. Every few moments her eyes seek out specific faces in the congregation. Andreas the executioner, disguised as a palace guard, Dr. Stephanos, who will certify the cause of death, Father Constantine, who will perform the funeral rites tomorrow. The Bulgarian Khan Omatag waits at the altar like a predator studying prey. He is older than expected, perhaps 50, with the weathered face of a man who has spent decades in the saddle and the throne. His retinue of warriors lines the church walls, their leather armor and iron weapons, a stark contrast to the silks and gold of the Byzantine court. They watch the ceremony with barely concealed contempt, understanding they are witnessing not a celebration, but a transaction. The wedding liturgy proceeds with excruciating slowness. When the priest asks if Theodora takes Omatag as her husband, her voice is so quiet you can barely hear her whispered, "I do." But the church's acoustics carry even whispers, and the words echo in the vast space like a condemned woman confessing her sins. During the ceremonial sharing of wine, you watch the Empress's carefully orchestrated plan unfold. She has personally overseen the preparation of the Khan's cup, ensuring it contains enough Bulgarian mead to render him unconscious within hours. The barbarian drinks deeply, toasting his new bride with the enthusiasm of a man who believes he has just secured a valuable prize. The wedding feast that follows is a masterpiece of diplomatic theatre. Long tables groan under the weight of delicacies from across the empire: roasted peacock from Anatolia, wine from the Greek islands, spices from Egypt that cost more than most nobles' annual income. The Bulgarian warriors feast with the enthusiasm of men who rarely see such luxury, while the Byzantine courtiers pick at their food and exchange meaningful glances. You observe Theodora throughout the feast, noting how she never truly eats, only moves food around her plate in elaborate patterns. Her new husband, growing more intoxicated by the hour, attempts conversation in broken Greek, whoring at her with increasing boldness. Each touch makes her flinch as if struck, but she endures it with the stoic grace her mother has trained into her. "Tomorrow we ride to Sofia," Omatag declares, his voice slurring with drink and conquest. "My bride will learn to live as Bulgarian women live, hard and strong, not soft like Greek flowers." The Bulgarian warriors laugh and pound their fists on the tables. The Byzantine courtiers smile and nod, as if this prospect delights them. Only you notice how Empress Eudokia's knuckles whiten as she grips her wine cup. As the evening progresses, you watch the final elements of the conspiracy fall into place. The Khan's guard captain, also drunk, accepts an invitation to sample the palace's legendary Eastern wines in the garrison quarters, removing him from proximity to his lord. The Bulgarian warriors are encouraged to visit the city's brothels, traditional entertainment for wedding guests. One by one, potential witnesses are eliminated or compromised. Near midnight, as the feast finally ends, you observe the traditional procession to the bridal chamber. Theodora walks between her mother and new husband like a prisoner between guards. The Khan can barely stand, requiring 2 men to support him, but he insists on performing his conjugal duties. The Empress kisses her daughter's forehead, a gesture of blessing that feels more like a brand, and whispers something in her ear that makes Theodora's face go white. The chamber door closes. The masquerade is nearly complete. In exactly 2 hours, when the Khan has passed out from drink and drug, Andreas will enter to perform the Empire's will. The performance of survival is about to exact its final, terrible price. You follow Princess Theodora into the bridal chamber, watching her navigate this gilded prison with the resigned grace of someone who has accepted the inevitable. The room is a masterpiece of imperial luxury, silk tapestries depicting the conquest of Troy, furniture inlaid with ivory and mother-of-pearl, windows that frame the Bosphorus like living paintings. But tonight, it feels like the most beautiful tomb ever constructed. The Bulgarian Khan Omatag sprawls unconscious across the massive bed, his snores echoing off the marble walls. The Empress's drugs have worked perfectly. He will remember nothing of this night, will believe his bride died of some sudden illness before their marriage could be consummated. The political alliance will collapse, but he will never suspect murder. Theodora moves to the chamber's small private altar, where an icon of the Virgin and Child watches with painted eyes that seem unbearably sad. She kneels before it with the same devotion she has shown since childhood, but tonight her prayers carry the weight of impending doom. "Holy Mother," she whispers, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face, "you who bore the Son of God and watched him die for the salvation of mankind, help me understand why my mother has chosen to let me die for the salvation of an empire." Her words pierce the silence like arrows finding their mark. You realize she has known all along what tonight would bring, perhaps not the specific details, but the inevitable conclusion of her mother's impossible choice. "I forgive her," Theodora continues, her voice growing stronger. "God help me, I forgive her, because I understand now what it means to love something more than your own child's life. She loves Byzantium more than she loves me, and perhaps that is what empresses must do." The sound of approaching footsteps echoes in the corridor outside. Theodora's head turns toward the door, and you see something extraordinary in her expression. Not fear, but a kind of transcendent acceptance that transforms her face into something almost holy. Andreas enters carrying the ceremonial dagger that should have cut the wedding cake. His weathered face is pale, his hands trembling despite decades of professional killing. This is different from executing rebels or foreign spies. This is murdering an innocent girl whose only crime was being born imperial. "Princess," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "I have orders from the Basilissa." Theodora rises from her prayers with dignity that breaks your heart. "I know, Andreas. You are only following commands, as we all must do." She moves to the center of the room, beneath the golden chandelier that casts rainbow patterns through its crystal drops. The wedding crown still sits on her head, and she makes no move to remove it. She will die as she lived, marked by imperial destiny. "Will you tell my mother something for me?" she asks, and Andreas nods mutely. "Tell her I understand why she made this choice. Tell her I pray God will forgive us both for what love of empire has driven us to do." The executioner's composure finally cracks. Tears stream down his scarred cheeks as he approaches with the dagger raised. "Princess, I—" "Quickly," Theodora commands with imperial authority that would make her mother proud. "Do it quickly, and let it be finished." Meanwhile, 3 corridors away, you observe Empress Eudokia kneeling in her private chapel before the same icon of the Virgin and Child, her prayer beads slipping through bloodless fingers as she counts down the moments until her daughter's death. Each bead is a second closer to the point of no return, each whispered Ave Maria a step deeper into damnation. The chapel candles flicker, as if responding to some supernatural wind. The Virgin's painted face seems to shift in the uncertain light, sometimes appearing sorrowful, sometimes accusatory. The Christ child's eyes follow the Empress as she rocks back and forth in an agony of anticipated loss. "Holy Mother," Eudokia prays, "if there was any other way, any other choice that could save both my daughter and my people, I would take it. But there is none. There is only this terrible mathematics of survival. One life against thousands, one beloved child against an empire's continued existence." The moment arrives, like a thunderclap. You feel it rather than hear it. The precise instant when Andreas's blade finds Theodora's throat, when 18 years of laughter and learning and love are extinguished to preserve a political entity that may not survive another generation anyway. In the chapel, Empress Eudokia collapses before the altar as if struck by lightning. Her prayer beads scatter across the marble floor like drops of blood, and her hair, lustrous black just moments before, begins to whiten with the shock of what she has done. When the messenger arrives to confirm the deed is finished, he finds her transformed into something no longer recognizably human, a creature hollowed out by the weight of necessary evil, a mother who has murdered her child and somehow survived the experience. The monster she has become will rule for 6 more months before guilt finally kills what love could not save. 6 months later, You stand once again in the same bridal chamber where Princess Theodora died, but now it has become Empress Eudokia's deathbed. She lies on the same silk sheets where her daughter's blood once pooled, her once beautiful face ravaged by the slow consumption of guilt that has eaten away at her soul like acid. The Bulgarian alliance she murdered her daughter to secure collapsed within weeks of Theodora's death. Khan Omatag, suspicious of the convenient timing of his bride's demise, forged new treaties with the Arab Caliphate instead. The empire's eastern borders have fallen farther than ever, and Constantinople itself now lives under the shadow of siege. The sacrifice was meaningless, worse than meaningless, it was counterproductive. Was it worth it? Asks Father Constantine, the palace chaplain who has come to perform the last rites. His question hangs in the perfumed air like incense, demanding an answer that will never come. Eudokia's lips, cracked and colorless, attempt a smile that becomes a grimace of pure anguish. "I saved the empire," she whispers, but even she can hear the hollowness in her own words. "I saved the empire by destroying everything that made it worth saving." You observe the courtiers gathered around her deathbed, the same nobles who applauded her decision 6 months ago, who praised her political wisdom and imperial resolve. Now they watch her die with the uncomfortable understanding that they too are complicit in the horror that has consumed her. Each of them chose personal advancement over moral courage, chose silence over protest when an innocent girl was led to slaughter. Through the chamber's windows, you can see smoke rising from the city below. Arab raiders have penetrated the outer defenses, and Byzantine citizens flee toward the palace walls seeking protection that may not come. The empire Eudokia sacrificed her daughter to preserve continues its inexorable collapse, making a mockery of every justification she constructed for her actions. "I see her," the dying empress whispers, her eyes fixed on some vision invisible to others. "I see Theodora standing by the window, still wearing her wedding crown. She's not angry, she's sad. So terribly sad." The hallucination, or perhaps revelation, continues until her final breath. As Eudokia dies, you notice that her last gesture is to reach toward the window where she claimed to see her daughter's ghost, as if seeking forgiveness that will never be granted in this world or the next. The funeral that follows is a hollow pageant of imperial ceremony. The same priests who blessed Theodora's doomed wedding now chant prayers for her mother's soul, their voices echoing in churches that may soon be converted to mosques if the Arab advance continues. The nobles who enabled the princess's murder now weep crocodile tears for the empress who executed their will, their grief as artificial as their earlier praise. But you follow the funeral procession beyond the palace walls, into the streets of Constantinople where ordinary citizens watch the cortege pass. In their faces, you see a different kind of understanding. The recognition that their rulers have become so corrupted by the pursuit of power that they will sacrifice anything, including their own children, to maintain their grip on authority. An old woman spits in the dust as the imperial hearse passes. "The crown eats its children now," she mutters to her companion. "What hope is there for the rest of us?" The observation spreads through the crowd like wildfire, becoming the epitaph not just for Eudokia, but for the entire system that created her. You realize this story will be told and retold in whispers, becoming part of the folklore that gradually erodes imperial legitimacy from within. As the funeral procession disappears into the distance, you reflect on the terrible mathematics of power, how the pursuit of survival can become so consuming that it destroys the very things it claims to protect, how mothers can become monsters when they love abstractions more than flesh and blood, how empires that devour their own children eventually starve themselves to death. The crown of Byzantium continues to sit on imperial heads, but its moral authority died in a bridal chamber 6 months ago when a mother's love became so twisted by necessity that it transformed into its opposite. The bloodstains on those silk sheets may have been washed away, but the stain on the imperial soul will endure until the empire itself crumbles into the history books, carrying with it the story of the queen who ordered her daughter's execution on her wedding night. Some sacrifices are too great for any cause to justify. Some victories cost more than defeat, and some crowns are too heavy for human souls to bear.